Hello and welcome back to A Week in My Flexible Working Life, sponsored by Condeco, workspace solutions for the future at work. I'm your host, Juliet Mann. Each episode, I'll speak with business leaders and influencers about how their workplace is changing and what the future of work could look like for us all. My guest today is corporate behavioural psychologist, leadership coach and international speaker Gerrie Hawes. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm so excited to speak to you. In your work, you focus on 4 competitive advantages that people have over all the tech that whizzes around us. And you sum that up as hope, don't you? So happiness, optimism, playfulness and empathy. So I'm really excited for you to unpick all of that and talk to me about what you mean. Now, I know also you've worked with global teams, all around the world, the big clients from British Airways, Adidas, EasyJet, Kellogg's, AstraZeneca, and you get into companies and sort of break down what they're all about, find out what they can do and look for those commercial opportunities to introduce new leadership styles and skills. And you know what? There probably hasn't been a better time for that than now, especially after the pandemic.
Absolutely. And thank you for inviting me. Yes, I describe my job as sticking my nose into boardrooms and asking awkward questions.
And what's the most awkward question, would you say?
What does that actually mean to your employees? So when they're explaining a convoluted strategy or even in a top-line strategy, I often find that different members of people around the table in the boardroom, they've all got different interpretations because they've spent so long honing it down to as fewer words as possible. Then when you say, well, okay, what, why, does that make any sense to any of your employees and how on earth do they implement it?
So your consultancy business, Remotely Human, you look at corporate strategy and then you think, right, how can we convert that into lasting behaviour change? Let's talk about you and how you got into that.
Well, there's a long and a short answer to that, but the slightly middle between version is, well, my background goes back to my childhood, really. I was brought up by a social worker and a teacher, so very human, people-focused. That led me into working out what I'm going to do at university, and I explored medicine and various other things, and then I landed on psychology. And there was a very rare degree in Nottingham University which combined psychology and zoology, and it was called behavioural science. Behavioural science is massive now, but in those dark ages, it was just the beginning of a topic, and it's been with me ever since. I mean, I've been client side, as it's described. I've worked for lots of big organisations, but more recently, when the last decade, I've worked on organisations that apply behavioural science and look at how you connect the strategic demands, the needs of your stakeholders, the intentions of bottom line to something that makes sense to people. I've worked on my purpose. That was a big thing a few years ago. And so what is my purpose? And well, my purpose is to try and help everybody enjoy their work. And that's quite a big statement, right? But if you understand why it has worth and why it's useful, then you enjoy your work. And we spend a lot of time working in our lives.
And that's why we've got you here today, because we want to talk about how the role of the employee is almost becoming more empowered, perhaps not because of, but maybe accelerated by the pandemic. The way we work, the way we live has completely been turned on its head, and lots of questions about that 9 to 5, Monday to Friday have been thrown up because we had, I suppose, a remote working revolution or a big test case. But now big companies, small companies, all shapes and sizes are having a rethink. Do you find that's what your clients are saying to you?
Well, they're having a rethink, yes. It's either a myth or it's a harsh reality of the Great Resignation. So there's 2 things going on. Big business wasn't working right. People didn't want to be schlepping into the office every day, and they were frustrated. And a lot of people were saying, can I work from home at least some of the time? So the pandemic has proven and built and made leaders have to trust their employees to get on with work. But on the other hand, people are now going, well, okay, do I really want to go back, and do I really want that life? And that's leading into the Great Resignation, which also needs to lead into the great retention drive, the great recruitment, and also the great onboarding of new people. There's a lot to unpack in that, I guess.
There's a huge amount to unpack, but I think maybe a starting point could be, as you say, the employee. You want to have, as a business leader, people who want to be there as well as people who have got the skills to complete the various tasks that need to be completed. So do you think that there's been a change? Do you think there's more of a focus on how employees are feeling?
There's a huge variety. Some people haven't had much work and some people have had a shocking experience. They may have been furloughed, they may have not had any work at all. And other people have been so overwhelmed, so busy. Businesses need to work out how they draw in the talent that they need, but also enable employees to have the work life that they want, as well as what the company needs. That's a hard balance. I was talking to a leader of a company that are proposing very strict rules, and I said, well, what happens if you have a bunch of people and they're crunching through an idea and they go for a run, in Regent's Park, whatever, together, and they're discussing and bashing around the ideas and getting some exercise in there at the same time? Is that allowed? It's like, no, absolutely not. They have to be sat at their desk. I struggle with that. I don't get it. If I need to think, I will go for a run, probably on my own or with somebody else, or for a walk, and to play with the ideas that need to be explored. You sometimes have to walk away from your desk. The answer isn't always staring at your computer.
Gerrie, talk to me a little bit about how your working day has changed, because you say, rightly so, that many people have had different experience. For some, they've never been busier. For others, their lives been upended. So in terms of your working day, how's that changed?
What I think is interesting is that I probably had a bit more downtime, like everybody else, because people were commuting to the office and people were traveling a lot. And because they weren't, then they wanted to talk all times of the day and sometimes the night. Because if you're international, you travel for group meetings, you're together. And so rather than having to have meetings at the early hours of the morning and late at night because you're just dialing in from home.
It's interesting. You talk about how people's working day have changed and that you maybe got busier. It sounds as if then there was a bit of a blur between when your working day started and when it ended. So when it comes to flexible working, how would you describe it? Does it mean being available 24/7?
It does not mean being available 24/7. And there are some things that you learn with years of practice of remote working, which I think I could still see with people that are new to it, if you like. The first thing is when you work in the office, which I do or used to quite a lot, and I'm increasingly doing again now, is that there's a lot of time when work doesn't seem to happen. Some leaders have been delighted with remote working because productivity has gone up. But has the collaboration gone down, and have the dialogues dropped? Have the conversations where you have moments where you identify you could be working smarter rather than just harder? So I think the first thing for people working from home, if that's the way that they are continuing to do, is you need to take breaks. You need to take breaks because you would anyway if you're in the office. You need it because the brain can't cope with working and concentrating that hard. And those breaks also need to include care for your body and your mind. You need to do some exercise, physical exercise, but you also need to do some work on your head. So whether that's meditation or combining it with yoga, something that enables you to have some downtime and also to have some downtime connection. So those chats you have over coffee in the office, do you remember those days? You need to have those as well when you're working. You need to dial up with a mate. And I do it when I work with various agencies. I'll just drop a line and say hi, and then we'll catch up. And they say, well, what are we meeting about? I said, no, we're just saying hello because we're being human to human together.
On your website, you talk about 4 undervalued strengths in leadership as being happiness, optimism, playfulness, and empathy. And I think this also chimes in with what you're saying about people having to think about themselves and the way they rearrange their working day. So how would you help a client develop those skills while they're working remotely?
Those of you that like a crossword or like your words, you'll have already noticed that happiness, optimism, playful and empathy spell out hope. And I wanted to find a way that we can look at the future of work and have a look at how we can not be terrified about what's happening in the fourth industrial revolution. So I started to look at what the macro trends were that were out there. a lot of people will be familiar with the work that Sean Akers done about happiness. That got me interested, but it didn't quite scratch all my itches. And so I started to look at what other things are there around and what's needed in the workplace. So the way I describe it is the first thing you need to do is look after yourself. And that's true whether you're working from home, working from office, or doing a hybrid combo. You need to look after your own happiness. And happiness is a combination of attitude, of mindset, but it also includes all of that self-care, physical exercise, and emotional well-being. So that's the first bit. If leaders are not happy, then they are extremely unlikely to be able to galvanize their team to follow them. Now, happiness doesn't mean ha ha he he. That's silliness, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about inner contentment. And that happiness work that has been researched at Harvard shows that we make better decisions, we're better at sales, we work better as a team if we have self-contentment. So that's the first bit. You need to do that before you do anything else. The next thing the workplace really needs is, or employees need, all of us need, is an optimistic vision of what success might look and feel like, something that you want to step towards. That is what we talked about, purpose, that sense of this is worthwhile. This is going to be a better way of working. This is going to lead to success. This is going to be worth my energy and my time. And so it should be optimistic, not blind optimism. It should be an optimistic look at the future.
So you're saying that every day when we go to work, we should be channeling this positivity and be full of beans. Come on, Gerrie.
I'm talking about self-contentment. That's not the same as joy, right? So you can feel you can be content. You can have inner contentment without being all smiley, right? Yeah. You don't have to laugh and be content. Now, if you've ever tried to play when you're not feeling self-content, it's just not possible. Creativity when you're feeling miserable is incredibly hard. I mean, I know you might say some famous artists have been incredibly miserable and they've created some art, but I might argue that maybe they're happy in their misery. But that's a whole other conversation.
That is a whole other conversation. So look, we've got that focus on hope, how we channel that into working flexibly. So can you tell me about any clients that you have helped and who might have been resistant or might not have quite got it at first, and how you managed to turn things around for them?
So the biggest challenge I think a lot of organisations and employees are experiencing, that work appears only to happen in meetings. Diaries are overloaded with meetings. You dash from one to the other and there is no dashing. That would have given you a tiny break. You zap from one to the other. Yeah. And in that zapping, you have no time to reflect, you have no time to think, and you have no time to chat with a colleague and go, I've been thinking about that. I don't think that works, or that's really interesting. So a lot of my work is getting employees to talk to other employees on a human level. And that needs to come from leaders. So leaders need to have the facilitation skills. And this is the biggest stretch for leaders right now. They're used to controlling. They've come up through the ranks probably because they were good at managing and good at problem solving. But problem solving and managing doesn't encourage connection and collaboration outside of your control.
But if you are a good manager and if you are good at organising things, surely then you should be nimble enough to be able to adapt to changing demands of your team and changing times.
That word should, eh?
Okay.
I mean, yes, ideally, but there's lots of ideals. We all have different strengths. That's part of my work on team dynamics, is that we all bring different things, but we also all have blind spots. I do think there is a bit of a problem in the way that people have been promoted, that they've been really good at solving and fixing things. Leaders are then saying, oh, don't worry, I'll sort it out. Well, you're automatically cutting it off at its prime, rather than coaching and facilitating and saying, okay, so what do you need? What would enable you to contact that person without me? What questions, what would enable you to make
you're
those connections?
throwing up some of the different issues here, but also having those supplementary conversations about, okay, let's work out how we do this differently. Let's think outside the box. That's in effect creating another meeting. That's in effect adding additional time onto the day that you've already maybe had some issues managing. This is a very fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's because a lot of meetings are rubbish.
Yeah. So it's more targeted meetings then.
Yeah, I mean, they could be short ones, but also being really clear what you want to achieve in the meeting. So be clear on the objectives, some pre-thought about what on earth this meeting is for, and have we got the right people there? And don't invite everybody. just have smaller, shorter meetings to connect everybody. And then when you do need to get everybody together, make it clear we're doing this because we're just making sure everybody's on the same page and off we go, rather than endless passive presentations.
We're talking about these challenges and about how managers can sometimes get to that brick wall because now they're having to transfer their skills in a way that might be unexpected. And in fact, there was a study for the Centre for Transformative Work Design that showed that 40% of managers said they had low confidence in their ability to manage workers remotely. It is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this isn't a recent thing, though. We shouldn't make the assumption, nostalgia isn't as good as it was, right? We can easily think that before the pandemic, leadership was great and that teams were all firing on all cylinders. I mean, if that was the case, I wouldn't be in business.
So a lot of the issues that you're talking about stem from really just being inherited situations. It's legacy. It's corporate legacy. This is the way things are done. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. Is there a case for ripping up the blueprint, getting a clean sheet of paper and thinking, right, what do we need to do? Maybe, we don't need everybody online 9 to 5. This flexible working could have people starting their day at different times. What would you say would be your starting point to help managers think outside the box?
It's interesting because SMEs have been doing that for quite a while, but I think we're focusing on large organisations, and there has been a lot of talk for the last 5 or 10 years about this thing, the future of work, and one day this will happen. Well, the future of work is here just a little bit sooner than we expected. And so we were thrown in it when we had to go, maybe we don't need officers. But what's happening right now is that the wise organisations are taking time to think, how do we need to work together?
You say that a lot of small and medium-sized firms have been doing this for a long time. So what could big corporates learn from them?
A lot of big corporates are full of people that haven't stepped outside of the, if you like, the sausage machine of school, university and work. And actually, for a while, maybe I was a bit scathing about that, but I recognise that that really works for a lot of people, that safety that when we could go to the office, work could officially stay there, maybe overspilled to the commute home, but you could separate work and, if you like, home or playtime. Well, SMEs don't really work that way anyway, because, it's like having a young newborn baby that screams in the middle of the night and needs various things. But you do become very focused on your income, your finances. So, and that's true of a lot of freelancers as well. You suddenly go, well, I could do with some help on this, but I don't want to employ somebody because I'm employing them to work 5 days a week and I'm employing them for the whole year. So in the States, there's a huge number, an increasing number of independent or freelancers or consultants happening in the workplace. That's low in the UK right now, but that's ever increasing. And I think there's a lot to learn from that. You flex the talents that you need, and you're incredibly respectful of their time and you pay well for their time, but you don't have to pay for the time when you don't need them. And that's, I think, the big insight that you get from SMEs, that you cherry pick and you use wisely when you need people.
So in a way, what you're saying, while companies are cherry picking, they're almost thinking like a startup. That's what the big companies need to do, which gives them more of a nimble approach.
Yes, and businesses have been talking a long time about being the lean startup or the increasing entrepreneurship. I think the challenge is that if you were entrepreneurial, highly entrepreneurial, or if you really embrace the idea of a lean startup, you would probably be working for or even starting up your own business. That's the challenge that big organizations have got, that people are not necessarily entrepreneurial when they work in a big, large, multinational company. They want to be led.
We've covered some of the negatives and the downsides of working from home during the pandemic and the challenges there might be. Let's talk a bit more about the upside, those positive workplace changes you're seeing.
I'm really interested about the future of the high street. I'm really optimistic about it. So there are, in various towns, units that have gone out of business because a lot of us do online shopping. they might become what we used to see as internet cafes, but in a much stylish way. So there are working hubs like WeWork and other similar places. And I'm in Brighton, and there's one called Platform just at the end of my road. But I think you'll start to see hubs appearing on the high street as well. And that brings its own income and commerce into that area. I think my only little concern on that is that you might find that people flock together rather than encourage that diversity of thought that we all benefit from if we do have different perspectives and different understanding of what's going on in people's lives.
I'm wondering, is there something that you keep finding yourself repeating, no matter the client, that number one piece of advice that you find yourself giving?
Ask your people. I've had it several times today already when they're saying, well, what we're thinking is da 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 da, or I'm not sure whether we need to do this or that. They need to talk to some people that it impacts and find out what's going on. What, would that work? What do they need instead? And that's about collaboration and connection and meetings where you actually meet. I kind of think we should ban the word meetings. We should be clear whether this is an update or whether this is a workshop or
I like that idea.
Problem-solving session.
So you know what you're getting.
Yeah, meetings and doings and thinkings and creatings, or whatever you want to call them, but just not have them all as meetings. But that is also about making it clear what the objectives are, and that I'm known for. I'm known for saying, well, what is the objective? What are we trying to achieve? What do you want people to know, think, and do differently as a result of this conversation or this meeting?
A lot of people listening are going to hear you talking about happiness, about optimism, that positivity.